It was a quiet afternoon in a small neighborhood, the kind of place where kids ride their bikes and play basketball at the park. But for 12-year-old Marcus, what started as an ordinary day turned into a moment that would change his life forever. Marcus, a bright and curious young boy, was walking home from the corner store when a sudden, unexpected encounter with police shattered the calm. What happened next was caught on camera, leaving the community stunned and sparking questions that demand answers. How could this happen to someone so young? What led to this shocking moment? In this story, we'll dive into Marcus's experience, the aftermath of that fateful encounter, and the powerful ripple effects it created. Stay tuned, because the truth behind what unfolded will leave you speechless. Marcus had always been known for his kind heart and big dreams. He loved drawing superheroes, imagining a world where people looked out for each other. That day, he had just spent his allowance on a sketchbook and some colorful markers. His walk home was supposed to be routine, a short trip through familiar streets. But as he turned the corner, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder with each step. Suddenly, he noticed a police car slowing down near him. Confused but calm, Marcus kept walking. Then came the sharp command to stop, followed by a series of frantic movements he didn't fully understand. Within seconds, a split-second decision left him on the ground, his new sketchbook scattered beside him. Witnesses stood frozen, unsure of what they'd just seen. Questions swirled. Why was a boy like Marcus seen as a threat? What led to this moment? The answers remained unclear. The neighborhood quickly became a scene of chaos. People rushed out of their homes, drawn by the flashing lights and commotion. Marcus's mother, Janice, arrived moments later, her heart pounding as she pushed through the small crowd. Seeing her son on the ground, frightened and confused, filled her with a mix of fear and anger she couldn't contain. The officers tried to justify their actions, claiming they thought Marcus matched the description of someone they were looking for. But Janice couldn't understand how her son, carrying a sketchbook and markers, could be seen as a threat. Neighbors began to speak up, some recording on their phones while others demanded answers. Among the crowd was Mrs. Carter, an elderly woman who had known Marcus since he was a toddler. "That's just a boy," she called out, her voice shaking. Despite the outcry, the officer's demeanor remained rigid, leaving everyone on edge. What would happen next? The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Marcus, still trembling, tried to explain himself, his voice barely audible over the commotion. "I didn't do anything," he said, his words cracking with fear. His mother knelt beside him, shielding him as best she could, her voice steady but full of urgency. "He's just a kid, let him go." More people gathered, their phones capturing every second. The questions grew louder. Why hadn't the officers taken a moment to listen? Why was a child being treated this way? Meanwhile, Marcus's mind raced, replaying the moment over and over, trying to understand how things had escalated so quickly. Then, a surprising turn. A man stepped forward from the crowd. He introduced himself as a local attorney and demanded the officers explain their actions. The confrontation grew even more intense, but one thing was clear: this was far from over. The truth was still waiting to be revealed. As the attorney pressed the officers for answers, their responses became vague and defensive. The crowd's energy shifted from confusion to determination. People began to speak out about past incidents in the neighborhood, stories of others who had been wrongly targeted but never got justice. It was clear this wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about a pattern that had gone unchecked for far too long. Then, something unexpected happened. A young woman stepped forward, holding her phone. "I have footage from earlier," she said loudly, her voice steady but firm. "It shows Marcus at the store, minding his own business." The crowd murmured as she played the video, the screen showing Marcus cheerfully picking out his markers and walking away with a smile. The officers hesitated, their expressions shifting. But instead of backing down, they started making calls. What were they planning? And why did it feel like things were about to take an even darker turn? As the tension reached its peak, The young woman's video played on repeat, solidifying Marcus's innocence in the eyes of the crowd. But instead of addressing the growing outrage, the officers began retreating to their patrol car, speaking into their radios. Janice stood her ground, refusing to let them leave without accountability. "You won't just walk away from this," she said, her voice resolute. At that moment, a senior officer arrived on the scene, his presence shifting the dynamic instantly. He approached Marcus and Janice, apologizing for the officer's actions and acknowledging the mistake. The crowd, though relieved to see some accountability, remained skeptical. Was this genuine or just damage control? Just as it seemed the situation was calming, the young woman with the footage spoke again. "There's more on this video," she said. The clip continued, revealing the officers targeting Marcus moments before realizing he wasn't their suspect. It became clear they knew they had acted rashly but chose to escalate instead of correct their error. The crowd's shock turned to determination. This wasn't just about one boy. It was about ensuring no child faced this again. For Marcus, this moment wasn't just the end of his story, but the beginning of a community standing up for justice. In the days that followed, the video of Marcus's encounter spread quickly, sparking outrage and conversations far beyond the neighborhood. Community leaders and activists stepped in, demanding changes to prevent incidents like this from happening again. Marcus and his family became the heart of a movement, using their voices to advocate for fairness and accountability. The officers involved faced investigations, and policies in the local police department began to shift under public pressure. While it didn't erase what Marcus had been through, it gave the community hope that progress was possible. For Marcus, life slowly returned to normal, though the memory of that day stayed with him. He channeled his emotions into his art, sketching pictures that told his story and reflected the strength of his community. As his mother hugged him one evening, she whispered, "Your voice matters, Marcus. You showed the world that even one moment can spark change."